Fire Emblem Three Houses is a game that I had been excited to play ever since trying out Three Hopes in 2023. That was my first Fire Emblem game. I was intrigued by the world and the story, but I eventually grew tired of the mindless warriors gameplay and the story's long-winded nature as everyone kept escaping. Whereas I found Three Houses gameplay loop much more interesting and engrossing with its calendar system that allows you to take a deep breath after the stressful battles. But reflecting on the story, I found myself rather disappointed and a little upset about on each past conclusion due to its contradictions, the messaging of war, and the lack of a satisfying ending. I'm going to be discussing each route in order I played. I'll leave chapters in the description, but as a general disclaimer, I will be spoiling all of the story, and I'm gonna mention details about Azure Moon, for example, when discussing Verdant. So if you haven't finished the game or a path, then consider watching this video a bit later when you're ready to. But let's begin with Golden Deer. That has always been my favorite house, as Claude is the most laid back, relatable, and neutral of the three leaders. And he looks like someone you can trust, but it's suddenly hinted at early on that Claude's smile doesn't always meet his face, and I discovered that his words don't always align with his actions either, as he claims that he wants to reunify Flawed by tearing down the walls that separate people, whether that's their beliefs, race, or background. Yet he proceeds to kill Edelgard for holding a slightly different view of Flawed, even though they both admit that their ideals for Flawed are virtually the same. So why doesn't he try and find a compromise like he said he would? This ending felt like such a missed opportunity, not only because this is the exact same ending as Silver Snow, but there was also an opportunity for Claude to actually live up to his words on screen and break this cycle, but he instead took the easier option of overthrowing Edelgard to establish his own desired empire. And then he has the gall to say afterwards that he wishes there could have been a different conclusion, as if he wasn't the one who decided to kill her. Claude also said before the battle that walking with her would be preferable, and that he would only kill Edelgard if she didn't yield. But Claude proceeded to contradict himself by killing her after she had virtually surrendered, her final words being, "I only wanted to walk with you." And I felt so betrayed and upset by this conclusion that I stopped playing the rest of Verdant altogether, as I was expecting Byleth to throw away his weapon after hearing that Edelgard just wants the war to end, and push back on Edelgard's nonsense that peace rests across her grave and all of that, because while she did deceive everyone into conflict, if she is genuine about ending the war and surrendering, then you have an obligation to explore that, but not according to the dictator Claude. The most important thing to him is that he won. And this sends all of the wrong messages about war and conflict. I've heard some say that they like the endings because they're each morally grey, but I don't really understand that at all. Personally, I couldn't help but feel what was the point of playing after experiencing all of the endings and seeing that none of them are satisfying nor edifying. To kill all of your classmates just to conquer Flawed is no reward, so I don't really understand why people think that is a good thing. I mean, some may say that unsatisfying endings make you question the author's message more, and it's more likely that you will heed their warning. And I've heard some say that this game has an anti-war message, and it reflects that war isn't worthwhile. But to me, that wasn't the explicit conclusion conveyed, as all of the houses treat war with a sense of inevitability, that you are helpless to stop, so you must join in. But that's not the truth at all. And Claude and Edelgard both briefly mention how they wish they could resolve conflict without actually fighting, but their actions demonstrate that there is no credibility to those words, as they don't take any real action towards that aspiration. There was no real necessity to destroy the last opposition as Claude did in Ember or Edelgard in the kingdom's capital, when both were cornered and virtually powerless. And all four endings suggest that peace was found in Flawed following the war and the destruction of other civilizations, essentially saying that war was worthwhile because you won and are now unchallenged and able to rule. And to me, that's the exact opposite of an anti-war message, as there's no repercussions for your actions mentioned, or discussion of the civilizations that you massacred. Claude also mentions that he hopes we don't feel taken advantage of, but that is exactly what all of the house leaders do. Your character is thrown into war and unable to choose peace. Instead have to round up territory, corner communities, and not stop until your leader is satisfied. Become answerable to no one. How is that choice, as all of the endings are functionally the same? Your victory is built off killing the other houses, and your only real choice is which house you choose to command. But at the very least, with Edelgard and Dimitri, you're fairly aware of what you're getting into, as Dimitri repeatedly reminds you that he came to the monastery for revenge, while Edelgard asks you to trust her for who she is behind the mask. And even then you can still reject her through Silver Snow. But Claude straight up deceives you, as he says that he wants to welcome those who may not think alike, but he will stop at nothing short of total control of Flawed. In saying that, I do respect Claude more after skimming through the final 2 chapters on a long play, where he has that epic final cutscene that represents his character really well, with how he has relied on others and set up tactics. And also in the final support conversation, he does selfishly give up being ruler to get Almeria on board, so he does follow up his word to some extent, and the ending is somewhat satisfying. So maybe I shouldn't be so harsh, but I'm just still unsure what to trust or believe with Claude. And regardless, I still think having the exact same ending as Silver Snow was a missed opportunity, and I wish there was a true ending. An ending where you didn't have to dominate Flawed and kill all of your school friends to achieve peace. And Claude and the Golden Deer were perhaps the best contender to do that. I briefly mentioned about the lack of legitimate choice in this game, but I did enjoy being able to carve your own path, and Silver Snow's ending cutscene makes a lot more sense, because from Seraph's perspective, it's the only option forward as he admires Rhea, and this path you also feel more justified in your decision as all of the Black Eagles members return, and both Golden Deer and Blue Lions die trying to take down Edelgard instead of you necessarily killing them. So due to all of these factors, the ending feels slightly more justified and motivated, as Edelgard really is painted as an enemy to everyone, even her own house, except for Hubert of course. But again, I didn't play any further after rescuing Rhea, as I really couldn't care less about Rhea or Byleth's upbringing, and I think White Clouds fails to properly introduce these mysteries or give much reason to why you should care about them. It inserts a lot of mysteries like the Flame Emperor, those who sliver in darkness, the Death Knight, Geralt, and your past, but I don't think it gives you that much reason to care about any of these affairs, and all of those threads become rather irrelevant to the rest of the game's events. Those who sliver in darkness is only revisited at the end in Two of the Past, and from what I've seen, I don't think a whole 10 chapters was necessary. Instead, they could have spent more time discussing whether Edelgard's claims about Seris's actions have any credibility, and just cut to the chase with Edelgard storming the capital. Overall, it's just a very bloated intro for a game that encourages you to replay it. But we'll move on to the Black Eagles route that I kind of got narrative whiplash from after playing Silver Snow, as everyone is just cool with siding with Edelgard for opposing reasons, and I've heard that the members essentially act as soldiers who blindly abide to Edelgard. I wouldn't know personally, as everyone died again in my playthrough except for the Death Knight and Edelgard. But I don't find the role of the student surprising, as Edelgard essentially asks you the same thing, to blindly trust her as she throws Fodlan into war. She pleads that you take her word and that the war is necessary for long-lasting peace, as Edelgard claims that the war saves more lives as it frees common people from exploitation by nobles. But what she is really doing is replacing this oppressive ruling system that, by the way, we don't actually get to see any evidence that the Academy is being oppressive, at least not in that route. So there is zero clarity if what we did was justified, as Seraph and Flan rightfully question whether that is what the people of Fodlan even want, especially at the cost of an awful war. And as Dimitri says, Edelgard is displaying a lack of confidence in the common people's ability to rise up and create action by themselves. Edelgard is overthrowing an apparent tyranny with another tyranny that attacks class 2, the same way Edelgard said Sirius took advantage of the common folk, as the Empire purged nobles for the sake of creating egalitarianism. But as Dimitri points out, if you don't have confidence in the people to dictate their own future, and you seek to become a dictator to represent them, then you are only yet again creating a system where the strong are powerful. Besides, since this isn't an action by the people, there is no real credibility that this will be sustainable, and leveling the playing field by removing nobility doesn't guarantee that there won't be a class difference in the future. All Edelgard really does is destroy any opposition and eliminate the choice for people to decide and dictate their own future. Instead, she strong-willed them into a future that is unclear if they even wanted. Like she says, she evaluated the amount of deaths in war compared to the continued exploitation of the people, but I still don't really understand why she couldn't have just peacefully said to the Sirius people, I think you are exploiting the people, I'm going to create a refuge in the Empire territory, are you okay with this? And then make the appropriate action following their response. But all of her actions are just so hyperbolic, unnecessary, and contradictory. And yet again, it's hard to feel satisfied or at all convinced that the war was worth it, as you are told it's peaceful and better. But how would you really ever know, as there's nothing in the route that suggested the Sirius people were bad, aside from Edelgard's claim. And there is no real assurance afterwards that things will be permanently better. I guess you could say, since the players there, her rule won't be so harsh, and I do like how you can spare Claude, and how each route is true to the house leader's fate had Byleth not joined them, as Dimitri dies deluded and revengeful in the other routes, whereas Claude isn't successful without Byleth's strength or savageness, and Edelgard is ice-hearted in Silver Snow, and does not find her resolve and steadiness without Byleth. We'll move on to the final route that I played, and I did spoil myself a bit of Azure Moon's story, as I honestly wasn't originally planning on playing it, as Dimitri was already my least favorite leader, and the long play that I watched confirmed that with his thirst for revenge following the 5-year reunion. I peeked ahead at the ending, and for whatever reason, from Claude being left unharmed and seeing that Dimitri met Edelgard, I thought this was the neutral true ending that I had been hoping for. I even thought Edelgard's costume was like a mutually agreed upon thing, or at worst Dimitri had transformed her into that so she could do his bidding. So intrigued, I did end up starting playing it, and I'm happy to say that it almost fixes every issue I have with this game. Firstly, it would appear that the story of White Clouds was written for the Blue Lions route and just adapted for the other houses, as there is substantial dialogue following Mutiny in the Mist, where the characters finally address the elephant in the room that is pushed aside by the other houses. That is, that we just killed innocent villagers. And Ash is horrified with himself And Dimitri likewise protests the suggestion that taking life is just in the name of war and to protect your own. Dimitri goes on to say that he shouldn't have killed them and that he wishes he had tried to reach a mutual understanding and a path of peace, which I guess is also foreshadowing for his conversation with Edelgard. And unlike the other two leaders who accept that casualties are inevitable and necessary to achieve their ideals, Dimitri displays a genuine uneasiness about war, and the feeling of regret and sorrow actually lingers with him as he continues to bring up his regret of stealing people's lives and stealing that person from their family and community. Blue Lions is also the only path that you could say takes an anti-war stance and actually wrestles with the torment of war for everyone, including the victors. The Academy Ball also has importance in White Cloud's, as he reveals his backstory compared to the other directly onto the next chapter where he sympathizes with your loss and reveals that he continues to carry the burden of the dead from the tragedy of Duskar. And this is the start of a long-running conversation between you and Dimitri about how you react to Dimitri's claims and seek to console them, whether you will sympathize and nurture his desire for revenge, or if you'll encourage him to find a less revengeful way. Of course, after that, Dimitri discovers the dagger that he gave to Edelgard, whereas in the other routes, eavesdropping the conversation doesn't really lead to anything, and the reveal of the Flame Emperor is very sudden and shocking, whereas Blue Lions has an actual build-up to this reveal, and personal reasons of why it's significant. And you can really tell in these scenes that despite Dimitri having this horrific desire for revenge, and a twisted mindset about how he has to avenge for the dead that Felix warns you about, he also does seem genuinely saddened by Edelgard's life choices and finds the whole situation very regrettable. And I say this route has an anti-war message unlike the other routes, as it displays a difference and development in Dimitri's philosophy unlike the other two leaders, as his transformation showcases what happens if you maintain your desire for revenge. But Felix, Rodrigue, and your character Violet all oppose Dimitri's backwards logic, and this climaxes at the Battle of the Eagle and Lion that I've heard many complain about for being chucked in for sentimental value and not really making any sense. Well, Azure Moon yet again fixes that, as there's a significant event that results from it as Rodrigue dies for Dimitri. But before Dimitri can jump to the conclusion and blame himself, Rodrigue is able to snap Dimitri out of his mindset of living on behalf of the dead, as he says, "None of us died for you. I'm dying for what I believed in, just as they did. Your life is your own, it belongs to no other, living or the dead. Live for what you believe in." And your character has the opportunity to reinforce this by saying that you need to forgive yourself and move on, with Dimitri responding, I am a murderous monster, my hands are stained red. Could one hope for such a life? As the sole survivor that day, do I really have the right to live for myself? And he goes on to clarify that revenge is not something that he wishes for, it's just something that he felt he had inherited as a responsibility from the dead. So in my opinion, the Blue Lions path fixes pretty much every issue I had, as it reinserts a bit of choice, whereas in the other routes it feels like you are blindly following and supporting the leader's actions. Whereas Azure Moon, there is an actual purpose for Byleth, as you have the opportunity to challenge Dimitri's way of thinking and witness him grow. White Clouds is also marginally more interesting to progress through, as it was clearly written for Blue Lions due to the events having a personal impact on Dimitri. And unlike the other routes, this route is actually proactive in introducing the themes for the rest of the game, whereas the other paths, the intro, is kind of irrelevant. Dimitri and Blue Lions also don't treat war as much of a necessity or inevitability as the other two houses do. Ash is horrified at himself for killing the villagers, whereas Felix challenges blind obedience for the sake of war, and Dimitri resolves that you should fight for what you believe in instead of dwelling on the past or the dead. He seeks a peaceful way like he hinted at the start of the game, by meeting Edelgard and trying to reason with her, and trying to end the war through acceptance, not annihilation. He's also the most insightful in dismantling Edelgard's flawed argument, pointing out that even if she eliminates nobility, that will just cause rise to another wave of strong and powerful class, as he concludes that only action by the common people will create a long-lasting change and break the cycle. I still find the ending unfortunate, and I still don't really have any satisfaction with defeating Edelgard and establishing a new kingdom. I don't really get the events of the last cutscene, as Edelgard is weak and smiles at Dimitri offering his hand, but then she pulls out a dagger and throws it at Dimitri, which doesn't actually hurt him, but Dimitri still proceeds to stab her. It may have just been an instinctual reaction. It probably wasn't necessary to stab her once she was weaponless, and the final cutscene shows her with a hand held up. So again, I'm not really sure that it was necessary to kill Edelgard again. Regardless, even if the ending is much the same, I'm happy that I did play through Blue Lions, as it mostly fixed all of the issues I had with the game, including its messaging around war. It gave Byleth a more important role and made White Clouds more interesting.